This video is sponsored by you. Links for the channel are in the description, along with the Discord. Hello there, Arknights' most hated YouTuber here, once again making videos that build off previous videos, which build off previous videos, to the point you need to binge the entire channel to know what's going on. So, I suspect there is a pretty much exact quarter split in the reactions you people had when seeing this video in your recommended feed or notifications, since God knows no one uses the subscription tab. A lot of you actually don't know and are here to have this question answered. Meanwhile, the casual players among you went, well, obviously, the best operator in the game is Wis'Adel. She has insane damage on an AoE bigger than Caper's thighs and pseudo-permanent untargetability. She also passes as a hit count operator with skill 2. The more experienced among you, still casual but more knowledgeable about the game and its modes, instead went, well, obviously the best operator in the game is Exusiai Alter. She has damage comparable to Wis'Adel but on a much better skill cycle. Not just that, her skill 2 ignores attack speed debuffs and gives both her and any operator of your choosing a fat barrier to tank some really stupid shit. Plus, her skill 3 is really versatile, and she can shoot adult videos with Kuro, Vanilla's pet slug, as a side hustle. Finally, those of you who engage with high-end content like High Point CCB, Vector Breakthrough, Max Default AIS, and more, went, well, obviously the best operator in the game is Tragodia. It comes a point where damage stops mattering in Arknights, and in that environment, which is the most demanding in the game, Wis'Adel and Exusiai Alter just can't help. Tragodia has incredible stall on incredible cycles with good damage, while keeping your team alive or straight up preventing certain enemy gimmicks completely. It's just a shame he's French. There is also the sinister fifth option of people who said Wang after watching a couple YouTube videos. The thing with Wang is that he really is essentially just Wis'Adel again, down to the SP cost on skill 3. Really, it's just too early to tell. We have to see him in more varied content to make a proper judgment. I want to add, recently in CN, using private servers, they've been able to go back and replay every past max risk / max point CC with modern operators. And Wang is used in almost every single one, and brings some of them down to as little as 3 operators. On one hand, this is an extremely impressive feat, and as you can see, Wis'Adel is nowhere in sight. I will talk about why that is more later. But then you remember some of these are 6-year-old stages. They were made for a meta where Silverash was our highest damaging operator. So truthfully, I don't know how it speaks for Wang as a best operator contender in present day, because on one hand, sure, very impressive, but on the other hand, Wang is so far removed from the environment these stages were made for, that his skill 3 actually just vaporizes the soul of those enemies. Straight up bypasses their physical form to directly expunge their soul from the cycle of samsara. In fact, you can see the immediate jump once we get to a modern CCB, from an average of 4 operators all the way up to 9. So, much like 3 years ago, we have re-entered a state of the meta where the number 1 spot is very contested. For all of Year 6, Wis'Adel was the undisputed champion, but Year 7 is really shaking things up. First, we need to define a metric by which the best operator is judged. What does it actually mean to be the strongest? Is it who deals the most damage? That can't be right. Arknights is too complex for such a simple explanation, and the harder the content becomes, the less reliable damage is. Is it the most useful operator then? But what does useful mean? With so many niches and gimmicks in the game, rating something by usefulness is just as vague and nebulous. How would you compare something like Haruka healing the equivalent of 3 lost limbs with 2 attacks versus something like Tragodia permanently stalling enemies? So, for my first definition of the best operator, I propose going about it by volume. In other words, the operator that solves the most content in the least effort. This includes all content in the game, every single main story stage, every single event stage, IS, CCB, Annihilation, SSS, Reclamation Algorithm, Trials of Navigator, and every other side mode. If we are to judge the best operator by volume, Wis'Adel is still by far the strongest. What she does for casual content, no other operator in the game can replicate. Even someone like Exusiai Alter, who on paper is a better operator, can't quite match Wis'Adel when it comes to this. She is designed for smooth-brained EN players in a very intentional way. She is entirely seriously akin to an accessibility option. Her most evident upside is the fact that she fires actual nukes with a skill 3, but to reduce Wis'Adel to this would be reductive. The camo is obviously a big part of it, making her untargetable by most sources of damage in the game, pseudo-permanently. However, a lot of people undervalue the massive AoE. It's slightly bigger than the Chapter 10 canon and slightly less wide than your mother. The AoE is what solves a lot of stages, often far more than the camo. In one shot, she can reach on opposite sides of a given map. She is made for people playing Arknights on the toilet on company time, and that's not even a joke. But it doesn't stop at skill 3. If you decide to activate a whole 3 neurons, you will realize with skill 2 she passes as a dedicated hit count operator, useful in things like Pepe event, Ling event, or IS-6. So, if we are looking for the operator that solves the most content with the least effort, it's the Cockroach Demon, and it's not even particularly close. Depending on how the next few months shape up, it might even be Wang. However, you could argue this definition is very flawed. On paper, it seems sensible to define the best operator by volume of content they solve while letting you scroll TikTok. But in practice, these are not very demanding stages at all. So, to say someone is the best because they can easily clear the baby mode drooling toddler content is a little iffy, isn't it? If someone is to be championed as the best operator in the game, they should hold up even in the toughest challenges the game has to offer. And La Cucaracha over here surprisingly doesn't. For all the insane bullshit baked into her kit, her most critical weakness is the lack of innate stat ignore in her kit. It means that in content like Vector Breakthrough or High Points CCB, Wis'Adel is gonna get stat checked. Her damage is extremely high, but it is not infinite. She can get walled. Or, much more simply, she gets completely shot on by any enemy with damage reduction, like Anastasia. I do want to say Wis'Adel is a very well-designed operator. The ways in which she is good are very intentional and well thought out. The end result of dishing out damage that goes up to the 32-bit integer is achieved through small effects peppered throughout her kit, which take very good advantage of her class as a flinger. Even if you lowered her numbers, she'd still have an incredibly self-synergistic kit. She also has very clear and obvious weaknesses, which do matter. And apparently that's a hot take among casuals who only ever play casual content and think they know everything about the game. I already mentioned skill 2, but skill 1 can be amazing and surpass skill 3 too. In IS, in certain Arcado setups, and in SSS with 5 sniper stacks, she can basically perma-stun. Wis'Adel skill 3 has glaring limitations which are intentional. The 50 SP cost and slow skill cycles, the fact it doesn't synergize at all with attack speed buffs, the fact attack buffs are also pretty weak on it, the lack of innate stat ignore in her kit, and the fact she deals physical damage. Yes, that was an intentional choice, and yes, that was intended as a weakness due to how damage calculation works in this game. Physical damage is really easy to stat check, unless you are Rei with more attack buffs stacked on top of each other than shitty isekai anime releasing each season. This is because it's just a subtraction between your damage and the enemy's defense. It's also why Wang, also known as Wis'Adel with good fashion, is an arts damage operator, and effectively just a way more high maintenance, way harder to stat check Wis'Adel. Arts damage is calculated in percentage. Resistance only goes up to 100, and really more like 95, since operators always deal at least 5% damage. So just due to how the game is coded, he is better by virtue of dealing arts damage. Really quickly, if you're enjoying the video, consider liking, subscribing, and hyping, which I still don't know what the fuck that does, but I think I am supposed to tell you to do it to help me out. Don't you want to help out a small Italian fanboy making videos? You do want to. Anyway, the second definition I propose for the best operator in the game is the operator that is the most valuable and solves the most difficult content in the game. It stands to reason that if someone is the strongest, they would be able to surpass these obstacles. And by this definition, Tragodia completely blows both Wis'Adel and Exusiai Alter out of the water. I feel the easiest way to explain how batshit insane Tragodia is to the average player is to think of him, and really any other stall effect, as damage multipliers. So let's say friend of the channel Ethan procs his bind, and that overall causes the enemy to get to the blue box 50% slower than they would have otherwise. If you add a DPS operator, it means that operator got to deal 50% more damage than they would have otherwise, because the enemy spent 50% more time in their range. Of course, by this logic, it would mean that blocking an enemy is an infinite damage multiplier. And yes, that's correct, actually. It's why a lot of modern bosses are either unblockable or very difficult to block permanently. If you can keep an enemy in the DPS's range infinitely, that is an infinite damage multiplier. Be it with the skill 2 cat making enemies go back and forth forever, or with skill 3 cages of chaos, there are many situations in which Tragodia is functionally an infinite damage multiplier, and unlike many other stallers, he functions as his own DPS. Tragodia's stall is like an onion, it has layers. For one, haha, silly enemy going circles. For two, haha, silly enemy stuck like a dumbass. And for three, we have to introduce paralysis, the ailment introduced by nervous impairment bursting on an enemy. Unless the enemy has elemental resistance, which, be real, they won't, paralysis will block the next 3 basic attacks no matter when they happen. Now, do you remember when I said blocking is functionally an infinite damage multiplier, but it has become increasingly difficult to block bosses because Hypergriff noticed that? Now imagine if said boss could not attack and had to sit there like an idiot for the vast majority of the time. Not just that, but you'd be shocked how many boss gimmicks and special attacks are directly tied to how many basic attacks they go through, gimmicks which Tragodia stops entirely. If the enemy has slow enough movement speed, you can straight up permanently stall them forever with the cat on skill 2. This is not super reliable, but when it works, that's GGWP for the stage. Otherwise, skill 3 exists. It spawns spawns Cages of Chaos, which block all enemies in the tile and can spawn on undeployable tiles. This is not even mentioning his basic attacks, which themselves apply nervous impairment and make permastalls on a few select enemies possible. In IS, with enough attack speed or SP buffs, he just permastalls every enemy in his range, because he refreshes paralysis before the enemies can attack through it, meaning they can never break the Cages of Chaos, or never hit your blocker. However, most of the time, his skill cycles won't allow for permanent stalls, but still extremely powerful ones. In that case, you simply need to add another powerful staller to the team, like Crownslayer or the far less cool Ethan, so they cover for each other's cooldowns. Finally, Tragodia is amazing in casual play as well. The cat on skill 2 is functionally an AoE arts/true damage bomb. As I said, he is often his own DPS. This fixes the main issue with stallers in casual content, that being, why would you stall when you can just murder the enemy instead? In casual play, there is little reason to ever use stallers, because you could just use Lemuen to strike them down from orbit instead. Tragodia fixes this by, indeed, murdering the enemies. You could argue the most valuable thing you can ask for in Arknights beyond even damage is control over the stage, and Tragodia is the definitive embodiment of it. However, you could also argue that this definition of the best operator is flawed too. Sure, on paper it stands to reason that the operator which is the strongest in the most difficult content would be the best operator, as that is the most demanding content and thus draws out the best performing units. However, show of hands, how many of you actually do max difficulty IS and max points CCB? If I see more than 2 hands, some of you are lying to me. While Tragodia is very much stupidly strong in casual play too, this definition of the best operator fails in practice simply because almost nobody actually engages with the content in which Tragodia is the best operator. For the casual player, for the average viewer, for the Twitter chad, this integrated strategies, Fiurgi Cup mambo jumbo simply does not matter and will never matter to their experience. Wis'Adel and Exusiai Alter will do for you much more than Tragodia ever will when it comes to event stages and such. So perhaps we need a happy middle. The best operator is someone who could excel in all content. Content that isn't entirely undemanding baby mode main story stages, but also not cock and ball torture IS. Something that the average person would engage with, like 620 point CCB and difficulty 10 IS. Under this definition, it's a pretty easy Exusiai Alter win. Skill 2's damage is on par with Wis'Adel, she gets a barrier to tank pretty much anything thrown at her, gets to ignore attack speed debuffs, and has very powerful niches on skill 3, all on better skill cycles. All in all, Exusiai Alter performs better than Wis'Adel. Usually, having Exusiai Alter to DPS will be far more effective and efficient than the cockroach. In high-end content, her damage starts lacking, but she has skill 3 to compensate, she has utility, she can spawn in more useful operators and manipulate their positions and cycles. This is future-proofing. Someday, a ground operator that beats out her skill 2 will exist, and Exusiai Alter will remain relevant through skill 3. So, for the content that most people actually engage with, Exusiai Alter is the operator that simply performs the best, not only being good on her own, but potentially helping out the rest of the team with barrier and revival. You can respawn operators who died, you can reposition operators across the map instantly, operators who retreat themselves no longer have that weakness, and you get to use skills twice in a row. But once again, you could argue this definition is flawed. While she is the best performing operator in content players actually engage with, she's not the one that clears it with the least effort, meaning she's not the one people will gravitate towards, and she's also not the one that is invaluable when the content gets harder. This means that Exusiai Alter is in the position where she's not gonna get drafted over Wis'Adel for casual content by casual players playing on the toilet, and not over Tragodia either for the Sweatlord content. Exusiai Alter truly shines in a very specific subset of content where Wis'Adel gets stat checked, but it's not so hard that Tragodia takes over by virtue that damage stops mattering. But you could also argue it doesn't fucking matter what players pick. Even if casuals gravitate towards Wis'Adel more, Exusiai Alter is still better, and that is immutable. Just because Myrtle is the most used operator in the game, that does not mean she wasn't power crept at least 7 times by now. You could argue for all 3 of them that they are the best operator in the game, and all arguments are valid through some lens. Once again, I have tricked you into watching a video that argues Arknights is a sandbox game. It is because the experience of Arknights is so individually different depending on what you value as a player and what you play that this happens. If you're a casual, the best operator in the game is Wis'Adel. If you want the operator that actually performs the best operator in the game is Exusiai Alter. And if you're someone that does challenges or high-end content, or generally a far more experienced player, Tragodia is the best operator in the game. Well, fucking whatever. We all know for the fucking 7th anniversary we're gonna get limited Talulah and she's gonna be the undisputed best, thusly invalidating this entire video. She's gonna take the fucking Chen 3 dragon HP % damage and just make it max HP % damage instead to just break the game forever. Max out your Gummy, bye. Ding ding, come get your outro slop, come eat your outro slop before it's gone. Thank you for watching and thank you to the channel members. In particular, Bard 2D2X, Noel Runes, Davonte Glassford, Lizard King, Ascended Asn, Nemotic, Camille of Wis'Adel, Yomines Passmort, Zoramar's Link, Long Chef, Jinjin Sentuna, Vinkoching, Ilio, Living Shad, Crayon Box, Eframn, The Lord of All Magic, URL Killer, Divius, Kino, Bomb Ninja, Apollo T, QX102, Mr. Laird, Lemon Raptor, 1K, Never Far Off, Zephyrinix, Nupo, Boru Barf, Kevin McQuire, I Antonio 3, Sebby Stum, Sam Kenshi, Clomalachan, 5QTZK, Genius Gay Shipper, Selfer 7, Maxos, Come On Here, and Larmendra, Prancing Peppers, Yuvune, King of Harems, and that guy with 2 names. I have no idea how I'm gonna make the Tangtang video next, because, you know, you're supposed to have it on the day of release, but that's kinda difficult since I'll have to test her and see what's her best gear on the day of release, so that's gonna be difficult.